The blood-stained telegram trembled in Eleanor Foster's hands as she stared in disbelief at the words that had just shattered her world. The stagecoach robbery that had claimed her husband and infant daughter wasn't supposed to happen on such a beautiful spring morning in 1876. Yet the harsh reality of frontier justice had left her alone in a world that suddenly felt too vast and empty. Eleanor folded the telegram with shaking fingers and tucked it into the pocket of her simple cotton dress. The modest home she and Thomas had built at the edge of Riverfall, Colorado, now seemed impossibly large and hollow. Everything they had worked for, the small general store they had opened together just last year, their plans for a large family, the promise of prosperity in this bustling mining town, all of it had vanished in a single violent moment on the road to Denver. The following days passed in a haze as Eleanor moved mechanically through the motions of arranging the funeral. Neighbors brought food she couldn't eat and offered condolences that couldn't penetrate the wall of grief surrounding her. The Reverend spoke of God's mysterious ways, but Eleanor couldn't find comfort in such words. When the last mourner had departed and she stood alone in the home filled with memories, Eleanor made a decision. There was nothing left for her in Riverfall. She sold the store and most of their possessions, keeping only what could fit in a single trunk. The stagecoach driver, not the same one who had been driving when her family was killed, regarded her with a mix of pity and concern as he loaded her trunk. "Where to, Mrs. Foster?" he asked, his weathered face softening. "Crimson Valley," Eleanor replied, the name of the town chosen almost at random from a newspaper advertisement seeking teachers and domestics for the growing settlement 2 days' journey west. The journey was a blur of dust, heat, and the rhythmic sway of the coach. Eleanor barely noticed the spectacular views of mountains and valleys as they traveled, her mind trapped in memories of Thomas's laugh and the soft weight of her baby girl in her arms. Crimson Valley appeared on the horizon late in the afternoon of the second day, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by towering pines and red rock formations. As the coach rolled down the main street, Eleanor noted the usual establishments: a general store, a saloon, a small church, a hotel, and various shops interspersed with modest homes. "First time in Crimson Valley?" asked the older woman sitting across from her, a Mrs. Hobbs, who had boarded that morning. Eleanor nodded, not particularly interested in conversation. "It's a decent town," Mrs. Hobbs continued, undeterred. "Not as rough as some. Got a good sheriff, Lucas Daniels, widower with 3 boys. Poor man's been struggling since his wife passed in childbirth last winter. The youngest just turned 1, the others are 5 and 7. Word is he's looking for help with the children." Eleanor merely nodded again, though something about the woman's words caught in her mind: a motherless baby. Children without a mother's care. The thought opened a small crack in her wall of grief. The stagecoach pulled to a stop outside the Crimson Valley Hotel, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch. Eleanor gathered her small handbag and descended from the coach, standing uncertainly as the driver unloaded her trunk. "You stayin' at the hotel, madam?" he asked. "For now," Eleanor replied softly, reaching for her purse to pay him. "I've got it," came a deep voice from behind her. Eleanor turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines at the corners of intense blue eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. A badge glinted on his chest. Dark blonde hair fell across his forehead from beneath a well-used hat, and a neatly trimmed beard covered his strong jaw. "Sheriff Lucas Daniels, madam," he said, tipping his hat. "Welcome to Crimson Valley." "Eleanor Foster," she replied, unable to muster more words. The sheriff paid the driver and signaled to a young boy lounging nearby. "Jimmy, help with the lady's trunk, would you?" As Jimmy scrambled to assist, Sheriff Daniels turned back to Eleanor. "What brings you to our town, Mrs. Foster?" Eleanor hesitated, unsure how to explain that she had come simply because it wasn't Riverfall, because it held no memories. "I'm looking for work," she said finally. "I saw an advertisement that Crimson Valley was seeking teachers." Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes. You're a teacher then? I was before I married, Eleanor replied. I taught school in Denver for 2 years. The sheriff studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the hotel. Let's get you settled. Mrs. Miller runs a clean establishment. Then perhaps we could discuss opportunities over supper. The town council handles school matters, and I happen to sit on it. Eleanor wanted nothing more than to retreat to a quiet room alone, but practicality won out. She needed work and a place to stay, and the sheriff seemed to be offering assistance with both. Thank you, Sheriff. That would be acceptable. Once checked in, Eleanor took a brief hour to wash away the dust of travel and change into her one good dress, a simple navy blue cotton with white buttons down the front. When she descended to the hotel's small dining room, the sheriff was already waiting, hat resting on the chair beside him. Mrs. Foster, he greeted her, standing as she approached. Up close, without the disorientation of arrival, Eleanor could see the fatigue etched in his face. Dark circles beneath his eyes spoke of sleepless nights, and there was a certain weariness in his movements that suggested a man carrying too many burdens. Sheriff, she acknowledged, taking a seat across from him. Lucas, please, he said, resuming his own chair. We're not much for formality here. The waitress brought coffee without being asked, and they ordered the evening's offering of beef stew. So you're interested in teaching, Lucas began once they were alone again. Eleanor nodded. I understand there's a need. There is, he confirmed. The town's growing. We've got about 30 children of school age, currently learning in the church 3 days a week, with Reverend Miller's wife doing what she can. She's not trained as a teacher, though. I would be interested in applying for the position, Eleanor said. Lucas studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. The school won't be ready until fall. We're still building it. He hesitated, then added, however, I find myself in need of more immediate help if you'd consider a different position temporarily. Eleanor waited, sensing what might be coming. Mrs. Hobbs mentioned your situation on the way into town, she said softly, watching understanding cross his face. Lucas sighed and set down his cup. News travels fast. Yes, I'm a widower with 3 young boys. My wife, Margaret, died bringing our youngest into the world. I've had a series of housekeepers and nanas, but none have stayed. The boys are challenging. They're grieving, Eleanor said simply. Lucas's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain. Yes, madam, they are. And I'm not home enough to give them what they need, between sheriff duties and trying to keep our ranch running. You have a ranch as well? Eleanor asked, surprised, small, spread about a mile outside town. My deputy handles things when I'm on ranch business, and my ranch hand helps when I'm sheriffing. It's not ideal for anyone. Their stew arrived, steam rising from the bowls. Eleanor took a small bite, finding it surprisingly flavorful. What exactly are you proposing, Sheriff Lucas? She asked after a few moments. Room and board at my home, plus wages to care for my boys until the school opens. Then you could take the teaching position and continue living with us if you wished, or find other accommodations in town. Eleanor considered the offer. She needed work, and the thought of caring for motherless children appealed to something deep within her wounded heart. Yet the idea of living under a stranger's roof, a man's roof, gave her pause. I understand your hesitation, Lucas said, reading her expression. My housekeeper, Mrs. Peterson, lives in the house as well. She's elderly and can't manage the boys, but she cooks and keeps things in order. You'd have your own room, complete privacy, and her as chaperone. He smiled slightly. I'm not often home anyway. May I ask about the children? Eleanor asked. Lucas's face softened. James is 7, smart as a whip but angry at the world lately. Michael is 5, quiet, keeps to himself mostly. And baby Thomas. Eleanor started at the name, her heart twisting. I'm sorry, Lucas said, noticing her reaction. Does the name trouble you? It was my husband's name, Eleanor admitted quietly. And my daughter was Emily. I lost them both 3 weeks ago in a stagecoach robbery. Lucas's expression filled with genuine sympathy. I'm truly sorry for your loss, Mrs. Foster. Eleanor, she corrected, suddenly wanting to hear her name spoken aloud, to be seen as a person and not just a widow. Eleanor, he repeated softly. They finished their meal in comfortable silence. As they rose to leave, Lucas asked, "Would you like to meet the boys before deciding?" "I could bring you out to the ranch tomorrow." Eleanor considered for only a moment. "I think I'd like that very much." The next morning dawned clear and cool, the summer heat not yet burning away the pleasant crispness. Eleanor dressed in a practical brown skirt and cream blouse, pulling her chestnut hair back into a simple knot at the base of her neck. When she descended to the hotel lobby, Lucas was waiting, looking every inch the rancher today rather than the lawman, in denims, boots, and a simple cotton shirt with suspenders. "Morning," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Thought we'd ride out if that suits you. I brought a gentle mare." Outside, 2 horses waited, a sturdy bay gelding and a smaller dappled mare. Lucas helped Eleanor mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The sensation of being touched, even in such an impersonal way, startled her. It had been weeks since anyone had touched her beyond the briefest handshake of condolence. They rode at an easy pace, the town quickly giving way to open country dotted with scrub and pine. The morning sun painted the distant red rock formations in brilliant shades of orange and gold. "It's beautiful," Eleanor commented, the first words either had spoken since leaving town. "It grows on you," Lucas agreed. "I came here 10 years ago, just passing through, meant to stay a week." He shrugged. "Met Margaret and that was that. How did you become sheriff?" "Previous one got shot," Lucas replied matter-of-factly. "I helped track down the men responsible. Town council asked me to pin on the badge after that. Been wearing it 7 years now." "And the ranch, Margaret's father left it to us when he passed. It's not large, but it's good land." "Enough for a small herd and some crops." He glanced over at her. "What about you? Where are you from originally?" "Boston," Eleanor replied. "I came west as a young woman to teach. Met Thomas in Denver, married, moved to Riverfall to open a general store." She swallowed hard. "We had Emily last year." Lucas nodded, not pressing for more details, for which Eleanor was grateful. They crested a small rise and the Daniels Ranch came into view. It was modest but well-kept, a main house of sturdy logs, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. A small garden plot bordered one side of the house, and a creek wound through the property behind the barn. As they approached, the front door of the house burst open, and 2 small figures raced out, followed more slowly by an older woman carrying a baby. "Pa!" The older boy shouted, running toward them. He stopped short when he noticed Eleanor, his expression instantly guarded. Lucas dismounted and helped Eleanor down before turning to the children. "Boys, this is Mrs. Foster. She might be coming to stay with us to help take care of you." He turned to Eleanor. "This is James, Michael, and Mrs. Peterson with baby Thomas." Eleanor studied the children with a heart that ached in recognition of their loss. James, the 7-year-old, had his father's blue eyes and a defiant tilt to his chin. Michael, smaller and more delicate, had what must have been his mother's dark hair and brown eyes. He half hid behind his brother, regarding Eleanor solemnly. Mrs. Peterson approached, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. In her arms, the baby Thomas watched Eleanor with open curiosity. He had a shock of blonde hair and his father's blue eyes. "It's about time you brought someone new," Mrs. Peterson declared. "These boys are running me ragged, especially this one." She jostled the baby, who giggled. "Come inside, Mrs. Foster. I've got coffee on, and you can see what you'd be getting yourself into." The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a spacious main room combining kitchen and living areas, and several doors leading to what Eleanor assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean but showing signs of a household without a woman's touch, mismatched curtains. Utilitarian furniture arranged without thought to conversation or comfort. Walls bare of decorations save for a single portrait of a pretty, dark-haired woman who must have been Margaret Daniels. Eleanor felt the children watching her as she surveyed the room, especially James, whose suspicion was palpable. "Are you going to be our new mother?" he demanded suddenly. "James," Lucas admonished. "It's all right," Eleanor said gently, turning to the boy. "No, James. I'm not going to be your new mother. No one could replace her." She glanced at the portrait. "But I could help take care of you and your brothers if you'll let me." "We don't need taking care of," James declared. "We're fine. I see, Eleanor replied seriously. Then perhaps you could help me. I'm new here and don't know much about ranching or Crimson Valley. James blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Before he could answer, Michael tugged at Eleanor's skirt. Do you know any stories? He asked softly. Pa tries, but he's not very good. Eleanor smiled, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest for the first time in weeks. I know quite a few stories. Would you like to hear one? Michael nodded eagerly, while James maintained his scowl but didn't object. Why don't you show Mrs. Foster around while I speak with Mrs. Peterson? Lucas suggested, deftly handling the baby from the older woman's arms. To Eleanor's surprise, James grudgingly took the lead. This is the main room. Pa sleeps through there, he pointed to a door on the far wall. Me and Michael have the room next to his. Mrs. Peterson has the small room by the kitchen. The baby sleeps in there too. And where would I sleep? Eleanor asked. In the room Pa built for Ma before she died, Michael answered, pointing to a door on the opposite wall. She never got to use it. James elbowed his brother. Pa doesn't like us to talk about that. It's all right to talk about your mother, Eleanor said gently. Remembering her is important. James's expression flickered between anger and something more vulnerable. Do you have children, Mrs. Foster? He asked abruptly. Eleanor felt her breath catch. I had a little girl, Emily. She was just a baby. Where is she? Michael asked innocently. She died, Eleanor replied simply. Along with my husband. James's eyes widened slightly. Like our ma died, in a different way, but yes, they were killed by bad men who wanted money. That's why Pa wears a badge, James said. To catch bad men, Eleanor nodded. It's an important job. But it means he's never here, James added, a note of bitterness creeping into his voice. Before Eleanor could respond, Lucas called them back to the main room. Baby Thomas was now sitting on a blanket on the floor, playing with wooden blocks. He looked up as Eleanor entered and offered a drooly smile that tugged at her heart. Mrs. Peterson has to leave early today. Her sister in town isn't feeling well, Lucas explained. Would you mind staying a while longer? I need to check on a matter in the north pasture. Shouldn't take more than an hour. Eleanor hesitated only briefly. Of course. After Lucas departed, Eleanor found herself alone with 3 children who regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and indifference. Mrs. Peterson had left a pot of stew simmering for lunch before her departure. What shall we do until your father returns? Eleanor asked. I'm going to feed the chickens, James announced, clearly not interested in spending time with her. I'll help, Michael said, but then looked at Eleanor uncertainly. Unless you want me to stay, you go ahead, Eleanor encouraged. I'll get to know your little brother. Left alone with the baby, Eleanor sat on the floor beside him. Thomas immediately offered her a wooden block, which she accepted with exaggerated thanks. He giggled, a sound that simultaneously warmed and pained her heart. Her own Emily had just begun to laugh like that when. Eleanor pushed the thought away and focused on the child before her. Thomas was sturdy and well-formed, with clear eyes and healthy color in his cheeks. Whatever else might be lacking in the Daniels household, the children were obviously well-fed and physically cared for. By the time the older boys returned, Eleanor and Thomas were fast friends. The baby had crawled into her lap and was now contentedly playing with a button on her blouse while she softly sang a lullaby her own mother had taught her. James stopped in the doorway, watching with an unreadable expression. Michael, less guarded, plopped down beside Eleanor. He likes you, Michael observed. He doesn't like most people. I'm honored, Eleanor replied with a small smile. Are you hungry? Your father should be back soon, but we could set the table for lunch. The simple domestic activity seemed to relax the boys somewhat. James even volunteered to show Eleanor where the dishes were kept. As they worked, Eleanor asked gentle questions about their lives, their interests, their routines. Michael chatted easily while James offered short but increasingly less hostile responses. They had just finished setting the table when Lucas returned. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene of domestic tranquility with an expression of surprise and something else Eleanor couldn't quite name. Everything all right here? He asked. We're just about to have lunch, Eleanor replied, lifting Thomas from where he had been sitting on her hip. Would you like to join us? Lucas removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. Yes, I believe I would. The meal was simple but pleasant. By the end, even James seemed to have dropped some of his defensiveness, especially when Eleanor showed genuine interest in his description of the new calf born the previous week. As they finished, Lucas cleared his throat. Boys, why don't you go out and feed the horses while I speak with Mrs. Foster? When the children had departed, Thomas, now napping in a cradle in the corner, Lucas turned to Eleanor. Well, he asked. What do you think? Eleanor considered the question carefully. The boys are grieving, as I expected. James is angry, Michael is seeking connection, and Thomas. She smiled softly. Thomas is still young enough that he simply wants love and security. Lucas nodded, his expression serious. And can you provide that, even while dealing with your own grief? The question was direct but not unkind. Eleanor appreciated his frankness. I believe I can, she replied slowly. In fact, I think perhaps they might help me as much as I help them. There's healing in being needed. There is, Lucas agreed. His eyes held hers for a long moment. The position is yours if you want it. We can arrange for your things to be brought out tomorrow. Eleanor took a deep breath. I accept. The first weeks at the Daniels Ranch established a routine that gradually began to feel comfortable. Eleanor rose early, helping Mrs. Peterson prepare breakfast before Lucas rode into town for his sheriff duties. The older boys had chores feeding chickens, collecting eggs, helping in the garden which Eleanor supervised while caring for baby Thomas. Lucas typically returned late in the afternoons unless sheriff business kept him in town overnight. On those evenings, the house felt oddly emptier, though Eleanor would never have admitted such a thing aloud. James remained guarded but gradually became less openly hostile. He seemed to appreciate Eleanor's approach of giving him responsibilities rather than treating him as a child in need of coddling. Michael blossomed under her attention, especially during their reading sessions after lunch. Baby Thomas, innocent of understanding, simply adored her without reservation. Mrs. Peterson, whose domain was firmly the kitchen, seemed relieved to have another woman in the house and gladly ceded childcare to Eleanor. Never had young ones of my own, she confided one evening as they washed dishes together. Don't have the patience, you've got a gift with them. Eleanor shrugged off the compliment, but privately acknowledged that caring for the Daniels boys had awakened something within her that she'd thought died with Emily. The pain of her loss hadn't diminished exactly, but it had shifted, making space for new attachments, new purpose. Lucas remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite, clearly devoted to his children, and visibly relieved at the positive changes in the household under Eleanor's influence. Yet he kept a careful distance, rarely joining them for activities beyond meals, and often retreating to his study after dinner to work on ranch accounts or sheriff business. One evening, about a month after Eleanor's arrival, she was sitting on the front porch with baby Thomas, watching the sunset paint the distant rocks gold. The older boys were already in bed, tired from a day of helping Lucas mend fences, a rare full day when the sheriff had been home. The screen door creaked and Lucas emerged, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to Eleanor, who took it with a smile of thanks. He's almost asleep, Lucas observed, nodding toward Thomas, who was drowsing against Eleanor's shoulder. It's been a big day for him, Eleanor replied. He took 3 steps on his own this morning. Lucas's expression flickered with something like regret. I missed it. There will be many more firsts, Eleanor assured him, and he waited until you were home to say a new word. Da, Lucas recalled, a smile warming his eyes. Though I'm not entirely convinced he wasn't just making noise. He knows who you are, Eleanor said firmly. All your boys do. Lucas sipped his coffee, looking out at the darkening land. They're different with you here, happier, even James. He's a good boy, Eleanor said. They all are. They just needed consistency, someone to listen. You've been good for them, Lucas said quietly. After a pause, he added, have they been good for you? Eleanor understood the real question he was asking. Yes, she answered honestly. They've given me purpose when I thought I had none left. I still miss my family every day, but... She stroked Thomas's soft hair. The heart has a remarkable capacity to expand. Lucas nodded, his expression thoughtful. Margaret would have liked you. It was the first time he had spoken his late wife's name directly to Eleanor. Tell me about her, she invited gently. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly he began to speak. She was from here originally. Her father was one of the founders of Crimson Valley. She had never been further than Denver her whole life, but she knew more about the world from books than most travelers I'd met, stubborn as the day is long. A small smile touched his lips. Wouldn't take no for an answer once she'd set her mind on something. And she set her mind on you. Eleanor prompted. Lucas chuckled softly. To my great fortune, yes. I was just passing through town, planning to head to California, stopped in the general store where she was working. She told me later she decided right then I wasn't leaving Crimson Valley. His expression sobered. We had 7 good years together. I'm glad you had that time, Eleanor said sincerely. How long were you married? Lucas asked. Just over 2 years, Eleanor replied. We were still learning each other in many ways, but I knew his heart and he knew mine. Thomas stirred against her shoulder, making small, fussing noises. I should put him to bed, Eleanor said, rising carefully. Lucas stood as well. I'll take him, he offered, holding out his arms. As Eleanor transferred the sleeping baby to his father's embrace, their hands brushed. A small, unexpected current seemed to pass between them, causing Eleanor to draw back quickly. Good night, Eleanor, Lucas said, his voice lower than usual. Good night, Lucas, she replied, suddenly aware of the intimacy of using his given name in the darkness of the porch. She watched him carry Thomas inside, then remained on the porch a while longer, trying to understand the flutter in her chest and the warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer evening. The following weeks brought increasing comfort and occasional moments of genuine happiness for Eleanor. The boys continued to accept her presence, with even James sometimes seeking her out for advice or approval. The household settled into pleasant routines, with Eleanor taking on more responsibilities as she grew confident in her role. She also began to establish connections in town during their weekly trips for supplies. The women of Crimson Valley, initially curious about the widow living at the sheriff's ranch, gradually accepted her as news of her competent care of the Daniels boys spread. Several approached her about the teaching position, eager for their children to have proper schooling. The schoolhouse should be finished by early September, Mrs. Miller, the Reverend's wife, informed her one Saturday as Eleanor selected fabric for new curtains. The town council is quite impressed with your credentials. I'll be happy to formally apply when the time comes, Eleanor replied. Mrs. Miller smiled knowingly. I dare say the position is already yours if you want it. Sheriff Daniels speaks very highly of you. Eleanor felt a blush rise to her cheeks. That's kind of him. Kind has nothing to do with it, the older woman replied matter-of-factly. Lucas Daniels doesn't give praise where it isn't due, she leaned closer. And between us, he looks 10 years younger since you arrived. Those boys were wearing him down to nothing. Before Eleanor could formulate a response, a commotion erupted outside the general store. She heard shouting, then the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Mrs. Miller gasped, and the store owner rushed to lock the door. Eleanor's heart pounded as she thought of Lucas, who was at the sheriff's office just down the street, and the boys who were supposed to be waiting for her in the wagon outside the store. The children, she exclaimed, moving toward the door. Stay inside, the store owner warned. Sheriff will handle it. But Eleanor couldn't stay still, not when James and Michael might be in danger. She peered out the window and saw with relief that the wagon was no longer in front of the store. Lucas must have moved the boys to safety. More shouting came from the direction of the saloon, followed by 2 more gunshots. Then silence fell. Long minutes passed before a knock came at the store door. It's safe to come out, called Lucas's deep voice. The store owner unlocked the door and Eleanor rushed outside. Lucas stood there, dusty and grim-faced but unharmed. The boys, she asked immediately. They're fine, he assured her. I sent them to the church with my deputy when the trouble started. Bank robbers, he explained. 2 men tried to hold up the Crimson Valley Bank. They're in custody now. Relief flooded through Eleanor, followed by a wave of emotion so strong it nearly buckled her knees. The memory of another robbery, another loss, crashed over her. Lucas must have seen something in her face because he stepped closer, one hand coming to rest gently on her arm. "You all right?" Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. "Let me take you to the boys," he said quietly. "They were worried about you." At the church, James and Michael flung themselves at Eleanor the moment she entered, wrapping their arms around her waist with a fervor that brought tears to her eyes. "We thought you might get shot like Pa's friend Deputy Collins did last year," James explained, his voice muffled against her skirt. "I'm perfectly fine," Eleanor assured them, stroking their hair, "and very proud of how brave you both were." Over their heads, her eyes met Lucas's. He was watching them with an expression that made her heart skip, relief mingled with something deeper, more personal than mere concern for a household employee. That evening, after the children were in bed, Lucas found Eleanor on the porch again, wrapped in a shawl against the slight chill of the late summer night. "You did well today," he said, joining her at the railing. "Most people panic their first gunfight." "It wasn't my first," Eleanor replied softly. "There was shooting when the stagecoach was robbed. I couldn't see it, I was back in town, but I heard the reports." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, today must have brought back painful memories." "It did," she acknowledged. "But it also reminded me how much I have to be thankful for now, when I saw the boys were safe." She trailed off, unable to fully express the depth of her feeling. "They love you," Lucas said simply. "It's plain to see," Eleanor smiled. "I love them too." "It happened so gradually I hardly noticed until today, when I was terrified something might happen to them." Lucas turned to face her fully. "When I took this job as sheriff, Margaret made me promise that if anything happened to me, I'd make sure the boys were cared for. At the time, I thought she was being over-anxious. I never imagined she would be the one to." He stopped, clearing his throat. "What I'm trying to say is, I promised her the boys would always have someone who loved them. I'm grateful that promise is being kept, even if not in the way either of us expected." Eleanor's heart filled at his words. "Thank you for trusting me with them." "Eleanor," Lucas began, then hesitated. "I've been meaning to ask you something." Whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by a cry from inside the house. "Baby Thomas, woken from sleep." "I'll get him," Eleanor said quickly, oddly relieved and disappointed at the same time. By the time she had settled Thomas back to sleep, Lucas had retreated to his study, the moment whatever it might have been lost. The weeks continued to pass, summer giving way to early autumn. The days grew shorter, the mornings crisper, and the schoolhouse in town neared completion. Eleanor found herself with conflicting emotions about the upcoming change to her situation. While she looked forward to teaching again, she had grown deeply attached to the daily rhythms of life at the ranch and her care of the children. One cool September morning, as Eleanor hung laundry on the line behind the house, she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Visitors were rare at the ranch, especially on a Tuesday when Lucas was in town. She rounded the corner of the house to see a smart buggy pulled by a sleek bay horse coming up the drive. A woman sat at the reins, dressed in a fashionable traveling suit that immediately marked her as an outsider to Crimson Valley. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and waited as the buggy pulled to a stop. The woman who descended was strikingly beautiful, with golden blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style and a figure shown to advantage by her well-tailored dress. "Good morning," Eleanor called. "May I help you?" The woman surveyed the ranch and then Eleanor with an appraising gaze. "I'm looking for Lucas Daniels," she said in a cultured voice that bore traces of a southern accent. "Sheriff Daniels is in town today," Eleanor replied. "I'm Eleanor Foster, the children's nanny." Something like relief flickered across the woman's face. "Ah, I see. I had heard Lucas had finally hired proper help. I'm Vivian Carter, an old friend of Lucas's from before he settled here." Eleanor kept her expression neutral, though something about the woman's tone set her on edge. "Would you like to come inside for some coffee? I can tell the sheriff you called when he returns." "How kind," Vivian replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, I believe I will. Inside, Mrs. Peterson raised her eyebrows at the fashionable visitor but dutifully prepared coffee while Eleanor gathered the children who had been playing in the backyard. "My goodness," Vivian exclaimed when she saw the boys. "How they've grown, James. You were just a toddler when I last saw you." James regarded her suspiciously. "I don't remember you." "James," Eleanor admonished gently, "Miss Carter is a guest." "It's quite all right," Vivian said with a wave of her hand. "Children are so delightfully direct, aren't they? And who is this handsome young man?" She turned to Michael. "I'm Michael," he replied quietly, instinctively moving closer to Eleanor. Baby Thomas, secure in Eleanor's arms, regarded the stranger with open curiosity but made no move to engage with her. "And this must be the baby," Vivian observed. "What a tragedy about dear Margaret. Though I always did think Lucas married in haste." She sipped her coffee. "He and I were quite close once, you know, before he decided to bury himself in this little backwater." Eleanor maintained her composure with effort. "Lucas speaks very fondly of Crimson Valley. It seems to suit him." Vivian laughed lightly. "Oh, I'm sure he's made the best of it. Lucas always was adaptable, but a man of his talents could do so much more in a proper city. I've just come from San Francisco now. That's a place with opportunities." "What brings you to our backwater?" Eleanor asked, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. If Vivian noticed, she didn't show it. "Oh, just passing through on my way back east. When I heard Lucas was still here and widowed, poor man, I thought I should pay my respects." She smiled. "We were engaged once before he came west." Eleanor felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. Lucas had never mentioned a previous engagement. Why would he? She reminded herself it wasn't her business. "How interesting," she managed to reply. "I'm sure he'll be surprised to see you." "I'm counting on it," Vivian said with a knowing smile. The uncomfortable visit stretched on for nearly an hour, with Vivian making thinly veiled critical comments about the ranch, the house, and Crimson Valley in general. Eleanor maintained her politeness with increasing difficulty, especially as the woman's dismissive attitude toward the children became apparent. When the sound of approaching hoofbeats finally signaled Lucas's return, Eleanor felt almost dizzy with relief. Lucas entered, removing his hat as he stepped through the door. He stopped short at the sight of Vivian rising from his favorite chair. "Hello, Lucas," she said, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "It's been a long time." "Vivian," he replied, his expression a mixture of surprise and something Eleanor couldn't quite identify. "What brings you here? Can't an old friend pay a visit?" Vivian moved toward him, placing a familiar hand on his arm. "You're looking well, despite everything I've heard about your difficulties." Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Eleanor," he said, turning to her. "Would you mind taking the boys outside for a while?" Eleanor nodded, swallowing the sudden lump in her throat. "Of course, come along, children." As she ushered the boys out, she heard Vivian's musical laugh and low, murmured words she couldn't make out. The door closed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo Eleanor's sudden sense of displacement. Outside, James kicked at her rock. "I don't like her," he announced. "She's very pretty," Michael observed. "That doesn't matter," James retorted. "She looked at us like we were bugs or something." Eleanor managed a smile. "It's not our place to judge your father's friends. Let's go see if the new kittens in the barn have opened their eyes yet." She led the boys to the barn, trying to ignore the knot of disquiet in her stomach. Lucas's past was his own business. If he had once been engaged to Vivian Carter, or even if he wished to renew that relationship, it was not Eleanor's place to have feelings about it. Yet as she watched the boys' delight in the tiny kittens, Eleanor was forced to acknowledge the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. Her feelings for Lucas Daniels had grown far beyond the bounds of employee and employer. Somewhere amid the daily routines of caring for his children, sharing quiet evenings on the porch, and witnessing his quiet strength and devotion to his family, she had begun to care for him in a way that made Vivian Carter's appearance deeply unsettling. Nearly an hour passed before Lucas found them in the barn. His expression was unreadable as he approached. "Miss Carter has returned to town," he said simply. "She'll be staying at the hotel for a few days before continuing her journey." "I see," Eleanor replied, focusing on helping Thomas pet a kitten with gentle hands. She seems very elegant. Lucas made a non-committal sound. Boys, why don't you go help Mrs. Peterson gather vegetables for dinner? I need to speak with Mrs. Foster. When the children had gone, an awkward silence fell between them. I apologize for Vivian's unexpected visit, Lucas finally said. She can be rather forward. There's no need to apologize, Eleanor replied carefully. She mentioned that you were once engaged. Lucas sighed, leaning against a post. Briefly, many years ago in St. Louis, before I came west, it was over long before I met Margaret. You don't owe me any explanations, Eleanor said quickly. Perhaps not, he acknowledged. But I'd like you to know that Vivian Carter is my past, not my present or future. She chose a wealthy banker over a man with wanderlust and no prospects. It was for the best. Relief washed through Eleanor, followed immediately by embarrassment at how transparent her feelings must be. I'm sure the boys would be glad to hear that, she said, avoiding his gaze. They were rather concerned. Were they? Lucas asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. And what about their nanny? Was she concerned as well? Eleanor looked up then, caught by something in his tone. Lucas was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. She began, then faltered, unsure how to proceed. Lucas took a step closer. Eleanor, what I was trying to ask you the other night before Thomas woke up. The barn door creaked open and James's voice called out, Pa. Mrs. Peterson says dinner's almost ready and you better not be getting barn dirt on your good shirt. Lucas closed his eyes briefly, a rueful smile touching his lips. We seem destined for interruptions, he murmured, but this conversation isn't finished. That night, after the children were asleep, Eleanor found herself too restless to retire. She sat in the main room, mending one of James's shirts by lamplight, her mind replaying the day's events and Lucas's words in the barn. The creak of a floorboard alerted her to Lucas's presence as he emerged from his study. Still up? He asked softly, crossing to sit in the chair opposite her. Couldn't sleep, she admitted, setting aside her sewing. Lucas nodded. I know the feeling. He studied her for a moment, then said, Vivian asked me to return to St. Louis with her. Eleanor's heart seemed to stop, then resume at a painful pace. I see, she managed to say, her voice remarkably steady. And will you go? I told her no, Lucas replied, his eyes never leaving hers. My life is here. My children's lives are here, Eleanor nodded, trying to ignore the relief flooding through her. There's something else I need to tell you, Lucas continued. The town council met today. The school will be ready to open next month and they'd like to formally offer you the teaching position. That's wonderful news, Eleanor said sincerely. But it means you'd be moving into town, Lucas pointed out. Most teachers live near the school. Yes, I suppose they do, Eleanor agreed, a sudden heaviness settling in her chest at the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving the children, leaving Lucas. Unless, Lucas said carefully, there was a reason for you to stay here. Eleanor's breath caught. What reason might that be? Lucas leaned forward, his expression earnest. Eleanor, these past months with you here have shown me something I never thought possible after Margaret died, that life could be full again, that the children could be happy, that I could feel. He paused, searching for words. That I could feel hope for the future. Eleanor's heart pounded as she sensed the direction of his words. I know it soon, Lucas continued. I know you're still grieving, as am I, but I've watched you with my children, seen your strength and kindness, your intelligence and grace under pressure. And I find myself thinking about possibilities I thought were closed to me forever. Lucas, Eleanor whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. He rose and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I'm not asking for promises right now. Just for you to stay, not as the children's nanny, but as my partner in raising them. To give us time to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, could grow into something enduring. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes as emotions she had been holding at bay rushed forward. The grief for Thomas and Emily would always be part of her, but alongside it had grown this new, tentative happiness, this second chance she had never expected. The boys need a mother, Lucas said softly. But more than that, I find that I need you, Eleanor. Your strength, your heart, your presence in our lives. If you're not ready, I understand, but I needed you to know. Eleanor looked into his eyes and saw not just the steadfast sheriff and devoted father, but a man with his own vulnerabilities and hopes. A man offering her not just a position or purpose, but a future. "I would like to stay," she said quietly. "Very much." Relief and joy transformed Lucas's expression. "You would," Eleanor nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "The children have become so dear to me, and you." She took a deep breath. "You have shown me that the heart can heal, can find room for new love without diminishing what came before." Lucas raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "We'll take all the time you need." "And the teaching position?" Eleanor asked. "You can still take it," Lucas assured her. "The ranch isn't so far from town. We'll make it work." A noise from the hallway drew their attention. James stood in the doorway, Michael half hidden behind him, both in their nightshirts. "Are you going to marry Mrs. Foster, Pa?" James asked directly. Lucas didn't drop Eleanor's hand as he turned to face his sons. "Would that be all right with you if someday I did?" James considered this with the serious expression he reserved for important matters. "She makes good biscuits," he finally declared, "and she doesn't yell when we get dirty." Michael peered around his brother, "And she knows lots of stories, and baby Thomas likes her best." "All excellent points," Lucas agreed solemnly, though his eyes danced with suppressed laughter. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Michael asked Eleanor directly. Eleanor looked from the hopeful faces of the boys to Lucas's warm gaze. "Yes," she said with certainty. "I'm staying." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor settled into her dual roles as the new teacher of Crimson Valley and Lucas Daniels' intended bride. The townspeople received the news with general approval. Lucas was well respected, and Eleanor had proven herself both as a caregiver to his children and as an educated woman capable of teaching their own. Vivian Carter departed Crimson Valley with cool dignity, though not without a parting remark to Eleanor that frontier life tends to age a woman prematurely. Eleanor merely smiled and wished her safe travels. The school opened in mid-October with 28 pupils ranging from 6 to 16. Eleanor found herself thoroughly enjoying the return to teaching, while still treasuring her evenings and weekends with the Daniels family. Lucas arranged his sheriff duties to allow him to drive her to and from town each day, quiet journeys that gave them precious time to talk uninterrupted by children. As autumn deepened toward winter, plans were made for a Christmas wedding. "Nothing elaborate," Eleanor insisted when the ladies of the church committee began suggesting ambitious decorations and festivities. "Just family," Lucas agreed, "and perhaps a few close friends." On a clear December morning, with snow dusting the distant mountains, Eleanor Foster became Eleanor Daniels in a simple ceremony in the Crimson Valley Church. James and Michael stood proudly beside their father, while baby Thomas, now toddling confidently, served as ring-bearer with considerable assistance from Mrs. Peterson. As Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor looked into Lucas's eyes and saw reflected there all the hope, healing, and love that had grown between them in the months since her arrival in Crimson Valley. "I love you," Lucas whispered as he kissed her, the first time he had spoken the words aloud, though they had been evident in his actions for some time. "And I love you," Eleanor replied, her heart full. Later, at the small reception held at the ranch, James approached Eleanor with uncharacteristic shyness. "Does this mean we can call you Ma now?" he asked. Eleanor knelt to his level, taking his hands in hers. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," she said gently. "I would be honored to be called your mother, but I also know that you had a mother who loved you very much. I'm not trying to replace her." James nodded, his expression solemn. I think she'd be okay with it, with you being our new Ma. She always said taking care of people was important." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she pulled him into a hug. "Thank you, James. That means more to me than I can say." That night, as she and Lucas stood on the porch of their home, truly their home, now watching the stars emerge in the clear winter sky, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "A year ago," she said softly, "I couldn't imagine ever feeling happiness again. When Thomas and Emily died, I thought that was the end of everything that mattered." Lucas's arm tightened around her waist. "And now Now I understand that life can contain both terrible loss and unexpected joy, Eleanor replied, that the heart can expand to hold both grief and love. Inside the house, they could hear Mrs. Peterson singing softly to baby Thomas, while James and Michael's laughter drifted from their room where they were supposedly preparing for bed. "Our family," Lucas murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Our family," Eleanor echoed, the words filling her with a sense of belonging and purpose she had once thought forever lost. As they turned to go inside, to the warmth and noise and messy joy of their household, Eleanor sent a silent thought of gratitude to whatever twist of fate had brought her to Crimson Valley, to this man, to these children who had helped her find her way back to life and love when she had believed both were forever beyond her reach. The years that followed brought changes, both expected and surprising, to the Daniels family. Eleanor continued teaching at the Crimson Valley School, where her firm but kind approach earned her the respect of students and parents alike. Lucas balanced his duties as sheriff with managing the ranch, which prospered under his careful stewardship. In the spring following their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was expecting a child. The news was met with mixed reactions, from the boy's excitement from Michael, cautious interest from James, and complete incomprehension from Thomas, who at 2 years old was more concerned with his newfound ability to climb onto furniture than with the concept of a new sibling. When Emily Margaret Daniels arrived on a crisp autumn day in 1877, she was welcomed into a home filled with love and the organized chaos that came with 3 energetic brothers. Eleanor sometimes found herself pausing in the midst of the daily tumult to marvel at how completely her life had transformed in the span of 2 years, from devastating loss to this abundance of family and purpose. Lucas proved to be as devoted a husband as he was a father, his quiet strength a constant Eleanor came to rely upon. He supported her teaching career even when some in town raised eyebrows at a married woman, particularly one with a new baby, continuing to work outside the home. "My wife is providing a valuable service to this community," he would say firmly when questioned, "and setting an example of industriousness for our children." As Emily grew from infant to toddler, Eleanor often found herself thinking of her first daughter, the baby she had lost. The grief never fully disappeared, but it softened with time, becoming a tender place in her heart rather than the raw wound it had once been. On quiet evenings, she would sometimes tell Lucas stories about Thomas and their life together, and he would reciprocate with memories of Margaret. "I think they would be pleased," Lucas said one night as they sat on the porch, watching a spectacular sunset paint the distant rocks in shades of gold and crimson. "To see us here raising these children together," Eleanor nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I believe they would." James, now 10, was showing signs of his father's leadership qualities, taking his role as eldest brother seriously, perhaps too seriously at times. Michael at 8 had developed a love of books that matched Eleanor's own, often retreating to quiet corners with stories that transported him far beyond Crimson Valley. Thomas at 3 was all energy and mischief, with his father's charm and ability to talk his way out of trouble. And little Emily, just beginning to toddle, watched her brothers with adoring eyes and showed every sign of growing into a strong-willed young lady with her mother's determination and her father's sense of justice. In 1879, Lucas was offered the position of territorial marshal, a significant promotion that would require frequent travel throughout the Colorado Territory. He and Eleanor discussed the opportunity at length, weighing the prestige and higher salary against the time away from family. "I won't take it if you don't want me to," Lucas told her. "The family comes first," Eleanor considered carefully before responding. "I think you should accept," she finally said. "You're good at bringing justice and order, Lucas. The territory needs men like you in positions of authority." "And what about what my family needs?" he asked. Eleanor smiled, taking his hand. "Your family needs a father who follows his calling and uses his gifts, will manage the time apart, and think of the stories you'll have to tell the children." Lucas accepted the position, and though the following years brought challenges, periods of separation, the complexity of managing both ranch and household in his absence, the inevitable worries about his safety. Eleanor never regretted her encouragement. Their partnership grew stronger as they navigated these new waters together. When Lucas was home, he immersed himself fully in family life, from helping James with his increasing responsibilities on the ranch to listening to Michael's enthusiastic summaries of his latest books, from playing energetically with Thomas to sitting patiently while Emily practiced braiding his hair. And in the quiet of their bedroom, he and Eleanor continued to deepen the bond between them, finding in each other not just passion but true companionship, the meeting of minds and hearts that makes a marriage endure. In 1881, Crimson Valley built a larger school to accommodate its growing population, and Eleanor was appointed headmistress while continuing to teach the older students. The position came with challenges, particularly balancing administrative duties with classroom teaching and her responsibilities at home, but Eleanor found she had a talent for organization and leadership that she hadn't fully recognized in herself before. "You've built something important here," Lucas observed after attending the school's Christmas pageant that year. "This town's children are fortunate to have you guiding their education." Eleanor smiled, warmed by his praise but also by the knowledge that it was genuine. Lucas had never been one for empty compliments. "I never imagined this life," she admitted as they drove home through the quiet winter night, their children asleep in the back of the wagon under warm blankets. "When I came to Crimson Valley, I was just looking for somewhere to exist. Somewhere that wasn't filled with memories." "And now," Lucas asked, his breath visible in the cold air, "now I can't imagine being anywhere else," Eleanor replied, "or with anyone else." As they approached their ranch, lamplight glowing warmly from the windows where Mrs. Peterson waited up for them, Eleanor felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey from devastation to this rich, full life hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of grief that resurfaced unexpectedly, of adjustment and compromise as she and Lucas learned to blend their lives and parenting styles. But watching the sleeping faces of their children in the moonlight, James and Michael growing so quickly toward young manhood, Thomas with his father's features becoming more pronounced as baby softness gave way to boyish angles, and Emily, the daughter who carried a beloved name and represented hope reborn, Eleanor knew with certainty that she had found not just purpose, but true belonging. The ranch house came fully into view, smoke curling from the chimney against the star-filled sky. Home, family, love. Eleanor had lost everything once, only to find that life could offer second chances when least expected, that the heart could heal and expand, and that the greatest purpose could sometimes be found in the quiet moments of caring for those who needed her most. Lucas's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and steady, as they guided their family home.